Good afternoon, everybody. Pigskin Pete here. Happy Wednesday to everybody. I have a very special guest on the line today. Anybody who's been following the channel for the past couple weeks knows that I've been planning on having a fan on, whether they're a YouTuber or a viewer or both, every single week during the off season from a different team. Last week I had Alonzo1219, the U family, on from Miami. So I thought, what better time to have a Florida fan on, being that Miami and Florida play each other next year, the very first week of the season, and we got Alonzo's feelings about Florida, and of course I'll get Falcons Fury here. I'll get his opinion on that game too. But there's a lot I want to ask him because I'm not an expert on Florida football. I'm just, I probably know as much as about any other casual fan of college football. I mean, I follow college football closely, but I'm not an expert by any means. This guy will be able to give me and probably a lot of you some insight into the program, the past, present, and the future. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring on Falcons Fury. Falcons Fury, how you doing, sir?
I am doing great, Pete. Have you had your ham sandwich today?
No, but as soon as we get off the line today, I'm going to go make myself a ham sandwich just for you.
Hey, make sure you put some cheese on that thing and don't use wheat bread, all right?
Yeah. I don't do wheat. I don't do wheat or soy, so we're good there. And I will put cheese on it too.
Yes, sir. All right.
All right. So the first thing I want to do, because there's a lot I have a bunch of bullet points just written down of things I definitely want to ask you. But let's just start with the past. All right. So Florida, let's just look at modern history. I don't want to go all the way back to the 50s and 60s and shit. I'm not going to bore everybody with that. But anybody who's old enough, if you're at least in your mid-20s or older, you remember the rise of Florida under Steve Spurrier. And then after him was Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer wins 2 national titles at Florida, and he has an abrupt and very controversial exit from Florida. And, of course, he takes a year off for medical purposes, and we're seeing that now with the same thing with Ohio State. But anyway, then he goes to Ohio State, wins another national title there. But ever since Urban Meyer left, and I think he left the program in a bad way, and I'll see how you feel about that. But ever since he did leave, it seems like Florida has kind of been chasing their tail, trying to get back to prominence. And you've gone through several head coaches. I mean, the most recent and probably most successful one in recent years after Urban Meyer was McElwain. McElwain wins 2 SEC titles back to back, or SEC East titles back to back, but can't win the SEC. Now he's gone, and of course we bring in Dan Mullen. But before we get into McElwain and Mullen and all that, how do you feel about Urban Meyer? Because I know I get mixed messages from Florida fans. Some of them, I mean, it's hard not to like the guy when he won you 2 titles. But the way he left the program, I mean, how do you feel personally about Urban and his time at Florida?
Well, I think it's a classic love and hate relationship. Like any Florida fan that wants to brag about 2 national championships can't go back and dog Urban Meyer for leaving the program. Now, you can't be upset, however, of the way he did it, because no matter how you look at it, he left us pretty much high and dry. And, does he really have a heart condition? Does he not? We may never know. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say he did, but to come back and coach again the way he did, it definitely left a bad taste in a lot of Florida fans' mouths. But you have to give him his credit. And a lot of Florida fans, they should definitely be thankful that he was ever here in the first place.
Yeah, I got you. So you don't hate Urban Meyer then, is what I'm getting out of that.
It's hard to say. I don't want to say I hate him. No, I don't hate him, because I do appreciate it, and I am thankful for what he did do when he was here. But like I said, I don't like the way he left. So
yeah. But do you blame him at all for the condition that he left the program in, or do you think that was just sort of an organic thing that happened and it was going to happen no matter how he left?
I would blame him in a way, because he let a lot of things, culture things, go under the radar when he was here. He wasn't
Right.
He wasn't a perfect, guy. There's a lot of stories out there about the way he trained players and things he did to them, and just a lot of disrespectful things. But it's partly on the athletic, directors we had then, and it's partly on him. So it's not all on him, but a lot of it is, I think.
Okay, I got you. All right, so sticking with the same sort of theme here, like I just said a minute ago, the next most successful coach. I mean, obviously, not winning national titles ever since Urban Meyer left, but the most successful one after that had to have been McElwain, right? For the short time he was there, winning the East a couple years in a row.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm not going to even get into the whole thing with the controversy about McElwain. That was all silly, with the shark and all that stuff. That's not has anything.
Oh no, that's real. Pete, the shark is real. It's on Jim McElwain's records. Look it up. He's in jail records for that.
All right. So he's got a fetish for sharks then, but anyway, so he won the East a couple times. A lot of people say he was sort of playing. No, not McElwain. Yeah, it was McElwain that was playing with Muschamp's defense. But as soon as Muschamp's defense was out of there, things sort of fell apart, and that was the end of McElwain. Do you agree with that?
Yes and no. I think even when we went 4-8, we still had plenty of talent to do great things. I just think he was so bad as a developer of high school, college talent, and especially quarterback. We brought him in here to be a quarterback developer because we haven't had one since Tebow, and he made Franks look terrible. I mean, he had more interceptions than touchdowns. Passer rating was terrible. He wasn't even doing anything with his legs, at least. So, I mean, and then, not to mention all the suspensions, the culture and everything. So there was really no positives with McElwain. I think it was a lot of, smoke and mirrors. He lucked into the East since it was so terrible, and got exposed in the SEC championship games.
So who was the one that recruited Greer when he was there? Was that McElwain or Muschamp? That had to be McElwain, right?
Yeah, I think that was McElwain, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And that was sort of a bad draw because at the time when Will Greer was there and he was playing really, I mean, he's probably the best quarterback in the SEC at the time. And then all that stuff happened with the banned subs. We all know the story. And he ends up going on and moving on to West Virginia and having a great career. And now he's going in the NFL. But that was sort of a bad draw for Florida. The way that whole thing went down. But all right, so McElwain is fired. I'm assuming you and most other Florida fans were tired of winning the East but not winning the SEC. And so a coaching search ensues last year. Lots of big names come up. I mean, you're talking about Chip Kelly, even what's-his-face, John Gruden. I mean, there was like a dozen different names that were floating around, and everybody's arguing and bickering about who should be taking the Florida job, right? And, of course, at the end of the day, Dan Mullen, who was a former coach, right, at Florida, an assistant coach, before he went to be the head coach at Mississippi State, he ends up being hired, and I thought it was a good hire. I know there's still some people out there that have their reservations about Dan Mullen, his record at Mississippi State as far as division titles, non-conference wins, wins versus ranked teams, that whole thing. But here's the way I look at it. Dan Mullen, there's still a lot to be proven. I'm not ready to sign the check and say that he's going to lead them back to another SEC title in the next year or two. But I'm also optimistic that he eventually can do that. And if you look at what he did at Mississippi State, they're Mississippi State. He got them as in the top 5 a couple of years, right? As high as ranked as number 1 one time. And really probably the only reason he wasn't competing to win the West those couple of years is because at that time Auburn and Alabama were both top 5 powerhouses, and they had to go through them. So I think that the talent level at Florida is much higher ceiling than what it was at Mississippi State. I also think that the East, even though the Georgia is very, very good now, and it looks like they're going to be good for a while, is still an easier thing to navigate through than the West is. So I think things are set up nice for Dan Mullen in the near future at Florida. And how do you see that all playing out with Mullen?
Well, I think first off, I think this first season under Mullen was a good sign for a few reasons. First of all, we haven't had a quarterback put up the numbers that Franks did since Tebow. So you can already see improvement in the position we've been looking for, all these years. Now, is Franks transcended? Is he something special? Is he even above average? Probably not. But I think there's something to be said about what Dan Mullen did get out of him, which was 31 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and probably about like the fourth or fifth quarterback in the SEC, which is full of talent, and then to be able to get to a New Year's Six bowl, win it in a convincing fashion, even though Michigan wasn't in that game mentally, I don't think. But just to get the brand back to being respectable from where it was the previous year, I think is really huge.
Yeah. And listen, I give yourself a little bit more credit about the Michigan game than you're giving them. I mean, why wouldn't Michigan be in that game mentally? I mean, that's as big a game as any that Michigan plays. I know that they sort of act like Georgia, where they should have been in the playoffs or something. No, I mean, when's the last time Michigan was ever be mentioned in the playoffs? They should have been super pumped up to win that game, especially against an SEC team like Florida. So I give Florida more credit for that game than most people do. I mean, you guys beat the brakes off of Michigan.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, here's my thing. We ran for 300 yards or something like that, crazy. Yeah. They had there's NFL defensive tackle out, and they had their NFL linebacker out.
Yeah,
so,
I know.
Yeah. But listen, I'm still giving Dan Mullen all the credit in the world because Franks had a great game. The offense had a great game. The defense played great because they weren't missing a lot of players on defense, or on offense. And our defense shut them down. So if you want to look at it that way, as a win, you can. So, yeah, absolutely. You got to give Dan Mullen credit for that win, regardless.
All right, so let's look at the recruiting, because that's been the biggest knock I've heard about Mullen, is that he's a great in-game coach, and I do think he's a great in-game coach. Obviously, he's a great developer of talent. We saw that at Mississippi State. We're seeing that so far, what he's doing at Florida. But recruiting, what is the projected national ranking for Florida's recruiting class this coming year?
All right, so last year, 2018, I believe we were 14th, and that's not bad. That's about average in the SEC. Yeah. But you've got to do better than that. So this year, currently, we rank 11th nationally, with an average star rating of 9.056. So that's all right again, and the SEC that ranks 5th. Now, I think Florida should be about 3rd. I don't think they'll catch Georgia. I don't think they'll catch Alabama. So I think they should be 3rd. And I think that they should consistently be in the top 10 if they want to compete. So I think they'll have about a top 10 finish. So I think that's headed in the right direction. But I still think he's got to do better.
Yeah, see, now you just told me something I didn't know. Because I honestly, I'll be getting in that in the next couple of weeks as we get it towards the signing day. I haven't really looked at the rankings a whole lot. I've just glanced at them. I did not know that Florida's ranking was that high. I would have thought it was going to be closer to 20. So, listen, a top 10 class, there's not much of a difference between number 11 and number 9 or 8. There just isn't. And, I mean, everybody wants to be the highest. I mean, it does matter. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. But you have teams like Clemson that over the past decade average around 12 or 13 per class, and you see what they're doing. So,
But here's the thing, Pete. Clemson and Dabo Swinney, they can pick – their actual ranking might not be top 3, but their overall average star rating is very high consistently.
Yeah, I know.
So the quality that they're bringing in is great. Now, the average rating that Dan Mullen has right now is okay. That'll keep us at, being a top 10 team every year. But if we want to compete with Georgia, we're going to have to get that up to, like a 9.1, 9.2. But the good thing for Florida fans is this. If you look at the elite recruiting programs like Georgia and Alabama, of course, they always get off to a quick start. Like by the time other SEC and ACC programs are struggling to close up their classes, they started on the next year's class. They've already gotten a few guys committed.
Yeah.
And the 2020 class, Florida already has 7 commits with an average rating of 9.1. So, and that's 4th overall nationally and 3rd in the SEC. That's where they need to be.
Right. Now, I'm with you. I get all that. The only thing I was saying was, in my mind, I was thinking that Florida's recruiting was in worse shape than what you're telling me. So that's a good thing.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Like if you would have looked a month ago, we were ranked like below Florida State, below Tennessee, maybe even behind Miami at one point, really early on, because they're not doing great right now at all recruiting. Like we were ranked in the 20s about a month ago. Then we got 3 big commits on the early national signing day. We got the commit from Chris Steele, who from California, that finally popped during the All-American game, and that pushed us up to about 15. And then we got a surprise commit from wide receiver R.J. Henderson. People thought he was going to Florida State. He chose Florida, and that pushed us ahead of Florida State and Tennessee to where we are now.
Okay, so you're looking at finishing after it's all said and done, right around probably 10. What you're saying?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So we know. I mean, this is a pretty much a foregone conclusion. Again, like an idiot like me who doesn't follow the roster and the recruiting as closely as a Florida fan like you does. We know Florida's going to have a great defense because that's what they do. I mean, that's just what they're known for, especially the defensive back units. They're always going to have a good defensive line. I mean, there's always a top 10 defense, basically. And so I'm assuming that's going to happen next year. You always have great skill players with, speedy wide receivers, all that sort of thing. I'm assuming you'll have at least serviceable and good running backs. So the big question is and has been, like you said, since Tebow left, the quarterback. Now, I know you just gave me all those stats about Felipe Franks, and they were good stats and everything. But can you talk to me about another option if Franks isn't that guy? What about isn't Emory Jones eligible to play this year?
Yeah, I mean he was eligible to play last year,
okay.
But I don't think Mullen wanted to burn his red shirt. I don't believe Mullen's ever started a freshman quarterback. So as bad as Franks was last year, this really shouldn't be too much of a surprise for people that followed followed Mullen back at Mississippi State and watched what he was doing. He never started a freshman quarterback, and he didn't do it here with Emory Jones either. Now, I do like how he used Emory Jones. You look at Justin Fields at Georgia, they just let him hand off the ball. Yeah. Dan Mullen gave him real reps. He let him throw the ball. He let him run the offense the way Franks was running it, the way it should be ran. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's the one thing that impresses me about Dan Mullen is that, a lot of these offensive coaches, they get stuck in the ways that they call offense. But you can tell that Mullen really knows how to tailor the offensive system around the skill set of the quarterback, because what he did with Felipe Franks and like you just said, on a smaller level whenever Emory Jones did play last year, was completely different than the sort of thing he was running for Fitzgerald at Mississippi State, because Fitzgerald was not a passer. He was a runner. So, I mean, that just goes to show you that he really does know how to develop, I think, quarterbacks to their best ability. So what do you give? I mean, what are people expecting? Who's going to start week 1 at quarterback?
If you ask me, I think Felipe is going to start week 1.
And do you think there's any chance that he gets dethroned by Emory Jones or anybody or somebody else that I'm not thinking of at any point?
I think it's definitely a possibility. Because Dan Mullen's going to put out the best player for the job. Good coaches, they don't care about your feelings. They don't care about, who was there first. If you're a senior, blah, blah, blah. They want to win. So if Emory Jones is the better quarterback, Emory Jones is going to be starting. So
okay.
Now I think he could definitely close the gap in Mullen's mind over the spring. Emory Jones can. But I think it might be a few weeks before he gets the starting job, especially because the type of team that we're playing week 1, they haven't been great, but they are a real competitor. So
I mean, who do you think has a higher ceiling, just in your opinion? I know maybe you haven't seen enough of Emory Jones to make that determination, but do you think that Emory Jones has a higher ceiling than Felipe or not?
I'll put it this way. In Dan Mullen's system, Emory Jones definitely has a higher ceiling. If you look at the way Felipe Franks is built, he's a big guy. He's real tall and has a big arm.
Right.
He's built to be a pro-style quarterback. That's what McElwain recruited him to be, and that's just not what Dan Mullen needs for his system. But he made it work with him, And by the end of the season, Felipe Franks was willing to run the ball and do the read option and things like this. But as far as being a pure runner, Emory Jones is much better, and he does have an arm. He has an arm. He's pretty accurate. He's shown that he can hit the deep ball, which Felipe Franks has struggled with. So, Emory Jones definitely has a higher ceiling. It's just a matter of, can he get a hold of the offense? Can he get the mental part down? And, things like that.
Right. All right. So we'll move on from the quarterback thing. I think you just taught me something there, too, that I didn't know. But before I move on from the quarterback thing, I just want to say this about Felipe Franks. That game, who was that against whenever he was shushing the home crowd?
Okay,
was that against South Carolina? I think it was.
Yeah, it was, because the game before, he got benched against Missouri.
Yeah, and then he was getting booed.
Kyle Trask came in.
Yeah.
And Kyle Trask looked pretty good when he came in off the bench. So fans, college fans we're crazy. Okay, we're all crazy. We're idiots. We got to get on Twitter and say crazy stuff. So the fans weren't happy with Franks. And he came back against South Carolina. Who knows if he would have started if Kyle Trask wouldn't have got injured.
Yeah. I was watching that game, and I don't know if he threw a pick early or something happened. He just he wasn't playing well like the first couple of series, and they were booing him. And then he comes and, he takes the game over, and then he starts giving him the finger to the mouth. And he did it a couple of times. And I became a fan of Felipe Franks when he did that. And I'm not saying that's a great thing to do. I mean, it probably wasn't a very good look for him, but it shows that he at least cares and he's got some fire. So I thought it was actually pretty funny to see that.
Yeah, he's an emotional kid, Yeah. Well, he's an emotional guy. So when he scored a touchdown, he's going to celebrate, and when he's not doing so great, he's going to pout a little bit, which is
that's not very good to do that. But
but that's another thing that impresses me with Dan Mullen. He's been able to handle Franks when he throws a pick. He just says, "Hey, keep your head up." The main thing with him and Mullen was, as long as he doesn't get down on himself and complain, the job is his. And in that Missouri game, he started putting his head down. The players around him started putting their head down, because your quarterback's your leader, and Dan Mullen understands that. So that's sort of why I think he got benched that game.
Yeah, and take it from a fan of a team who's had elite quarterback play between Deshaun Watson and Lawrence, and those guys, they are so even-keeled. I mean, there's no highs, no lows. I mean, they have the same look on their face, the same demeanor no matter what's going on, and that's really what you want from your quarterback. But it's also good to see a little bit of emotion every once in a while too. But all right, so moving on from the quarterback situation, let's talk a little bit about the last thing I want to talk about not yet, but in a minute, we'll talk about Miami. But first, I want to talk about Florida's schedule this year. Now, I know you have Miami week 1. Everybody knows about that. Who's your other big non-con game, or is there another big non-con game?
Well, like you said, Miami week 1, we'll get to that in a minute. Our out-of-conference game, we play Florida State every year, of course, but that game doesn't look as appealing anymore now that Willie Taggart's essentially ruined what Florida State is the 5th most talented team in the nation.
I know.
And, that's all you need to hear.
Yeah, it's pitiful. We could do a whole video just on Florida State, but I guess other than that, you have your East opponents that you play every year, and then who's your cross divisional? LSU, right?
Yeah, LSU. Yeah. See, people want to complain about Florida not playing big out of conference games. Well, first of all, we played perennial powerhouse when Jimbo was at Florida State every year.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Yeah,
we played LSU from the West every year. They're like typically the second best team in that division.
Yeah.
And usually the East has been bad, but with Georgia and hell, even Kentucky beat us for the first time in 31 years.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody should be complaining about the strength of Florida's schedule this year.
Yeah. No, I listen. You know how I am about the SEC and everything, but I don't think there's any way that anybody can sit there and say that Florida plays a weak schedule. I mean, even though they're in the East, like you said, they play Georgia, they play LSU, they play Florida State, who's normally a top 10 program every year for the past 30 years. Now they're playing Miami this year, who's I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say what Miami's going to be. We'll find out. But I mean, just
not to mention we play Auburn this year. I mean, if you
okay.
want to throw that one in there.
Okay, so that's another one. I guess it's a rotating game, right?
Yeah.
Auburn. Yeah. So yeah, Florida's. I mean, listen, there might be 3 or 4 teams in all of the country every year that actually you can sit down and say, oh, they have a very, very hard schedule. The rest of them, they have a couple of hard games, and the rest of them are average. That's just the way the college football is. But so out of all those, so you just named the hardest ones on your schedule, right? Are going to be, well, we can eliminate Florida State. We're going to go ahead and pencil that in as a win. Georgia, yep. LSU, Auburn. Those are probably what you consider to be your 3 toughest games this coming year, right?
I would almost put Miami over Auburn, and I'll explain that later. But let's go ahead and go with that for now.
All right. So let's just. I don't want to phrase it like this, but I'm going to. Let's assume with just the assumption, and obviously this is not necessarily going to happen, but let's say you lose to Georgia, okay? Let's say you lose to LSU, which I'd be willing to bet that you probably don't lose to LSU. But anyway, let's say that you do, and let's say that you lose to either Miami or LSU. That's 3 losses, so that would put you at 9-3. And also that would only have you having 1 loss in the East. But that would have you having 2 losses in the SEC. So is a 9-3 season scenario where you're at least in contention for the East, depending on what happens with Georgia, is that considered to be an acceptable season in Dan Mullen's second year, or is that a disappointment? I mean, is the only acceptable thing for this next year as a Florida fan is to win the East? Is that your goal?
It's hard to say. It's like there's so many ways. Like if we lose to like a bad LSU team, obviously that looks bad. I think it's all about who we lose to, how we lose, things like that. But as far as the record goes, I think we should. If we're losing more than 2 games, unless there's some odd circumstance that happens, I think that's a little bit of a disappointment for Florida fans.
All right. So hold on. The LSU game that got all screwed up because of the hurricanes and stuff, and you had like back-to-back games in one place, right?
Yeah. We go to
You go to Death Valley.
We go to LSU this year.
All right. Where's the Auburn game at?
It is that's at Auburn as well.
All right. So both of those are road games, and then of course Georgia and Miami are both going to be played in Orlando, right?
No. Sorry, hold on. Sorry. So the Georgia game is played in Jacksonville every year.
Oh yeah, Jacksonville. My bad.
The Miami game, we do play Miami in Orlando, which is basically a home game for us.
Yeah, I don't know why I thought Orlando. I knew it was in Jacksonville, the largest outdoor cocktail party, whatever.
Yeah, it's like, see, this is why you got to have a ham sandwich every day. Get you in line, Pete.
Yeah, you're right, man. I'm just not all there. All right, so the last and the main thing. I mean, this is the most fun part of this conversation, right? So you heard my conversation with Alonzo.
Me and Alonzo have spoken a few times, so.
Okay. Alonzo, he's my boy. I love him. But and the thing I asked him is, and it wasn't trying to get him riled up or nothing. It was out of sheer curiosity. Is like that I've noticed how much Florida fans and Miami fans hate each other, because I would have thought it would have been the ones that play each other every year, Florida State. And you guys play Florida State every year too, so I thought it would be more hatred between the ones that play every year. But he quickly reminded me that Florida and Miami hate each other worse than the Florida State rivalries go. And he's blaming it on Florida. You heard that. He's saying that Florida's been ducking Miami ever since, I don't know what year, the 90s or whatever, early 2000s. And finally, you guys are playing again this year, but you're not scheduled to play each other anytime in the near future. So what is it? And I got his opinion, but what is it about Miami that Florida fans hate so much?
Well, listen, I didn't give can I curse on here a little bit? I don't know. I didn't give 2 hoots and a holler about Miami until we have to play them. So until Miami fans start, messaging me and at me on Twitter and blah blah blah. Yeah, now I hate Miami just as much as they hate us. So I don't know. They have some weird obsession with Florida. They think we're scared of them. Why would we be scared? I don't know. So, I mean, they need us a lot more than we need them, in my opinion. So I'll leave it at that. I mean,
So there's no truth to what he's saying that Miami's ducking or that Florida's ducking Miami.
why? What reason would we have to play Miami when we've been over Florida's schedule? I mean, we played plenty of tough teams. Why would we have to play Miami?
Yeah, no, there's no debate that you don't have to. I'm just wondering if you're. I mean, I don't know. According to him, and again, I'm an objective observer here. I could care less. According to him, that they would love to play Florida on an annual basis, but the feeling is not mutual. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, listen, I'm not a athletic director or anything, but as a fan, I would love to play them at least every other year. You know, I called me and Alonso spoke yesterday. I think we both agreed that we would like at least play every other year.
You know what? I actually do agree with you, though. I don't really know the benefit for either team to play each other every year.
I mean, so you have UCF, right?
Yeah.
They need a team in a program like Florida to gain relevance, right?
Yeah, right.
If they were to beat us at, say, a neutral site or at our place, that would make them look really good, right?
Yeah.
If they beat us, that would make us look terrible.
There's nothing there. There's really nothing.
Blah, blah.
Yeah.
Florida playing Miami every year is just another rivalry game, which makes that another tough game for Florida. I mean, we already played Florida State, already played LSU, already played in SEC. You know, so I think that's why they don't schedule them more often.
Yeah. No, actually, I mean that makes sense. I don't even really see the benefit of Miami playing Florida every year, really. I mean, it's just another, like you said, and the way that the college football works these days is you basically just need to win your division with as few losses as possible and have a chance to win your conference, and that's the only way you're going to get in the playoffs. And adding a Florida to that schedule if you're Miami, or adding a Miami to if you're Florida, I mean that really doesn't do you any good based on the teams that you already have to play and the conference you already play in. So I get it. I get it.
I mean, I think we're probably the hardest team for Miami this year. I mean, would you agree? I mean, I don't know if you know the schedule or not, but
yeah, I think I do agree actually. Yeah, because Florida State's not going to. We're assuming they're going to be bad, and then the rest of the Coastal Division, the ACC right now is just awfully terrible.
Yeah.
And,
so I mean,
so I don't know. I don't know who they play.
If they didn't have your Tigers on the other side waiting for them,
yeah,
in the championship game, they wouldn't have a lot. You know, they would be like Notre Dame, basically.
Yeah, I don't know who their other non-con game is. But anyway, I do. I mean, just off the top of my head, I would have to agree that Florida's probably their toughest game this year. And, things could change. Who knows how good any of these other teams are going to be. But, yeah, on paper, Florida right now, definitely the toughest one they got. So, all right, man. Well, I guess that's it. I mean, I don't know. So give me, just before we get off, give me a final prediction. And I know this is way too early. Give me a final prediction for an overall record and where you finish in the SEC for 2019. I won't hold you to it, except for the fact that I will.
Yeah, that's fine. It's fine. I'll say we'll go 10-2.
Okay.
And I think we'll win the East, and I think we'll lose in the SEC championship game.
Okay.
And just for a little icing on top, I think we'll lose to LSU and Auburn.
All right. I got you. So you're going to beat Miami, you're going to beat Georgia.
Yep.
And, of course, Florida State. But, yeah, so that Georgia game, especially the past few years, because the rest of the East just I don't feel like can compete right now anyway.
Now, here's an interesting thing. Florida's defensive back coach essentially flipped, if you will, to Georgia this past week.
I did hear about that. So
that game's that game's going to be really interesting.
Yeah. I think it's going to be interesting either way. I mean, I know the last couple of years, Georgia's absolutely waxed Florida and owned them. But I do think
now this year Florida was actually winning in the third quarter. But
what was the final
let's
score
not
of the
make
game,
excuses. But they ran away with it in the end in the fourth quarter with their run game and whatnot. But it's closer than Georgia fans will tell you.
Yeah, no, I think it is too. I mean, the thing with the Georgia and Florida game is, until I see different, is it's so hard to predict. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised by any outcome. I would not be surprised if Georgia won by 3 touchdowns. I also would not be surprised if Florida found a way to win the game. And that's a 2-for-1 game because, like I said, nobody else in the East right now can really probably compete with those two teams. Those are the top 2 teams in the East, in my opinion. So the winner of that game, it's like winning 2 games in conference because it gives you that tiebreaker in the SEC.
Yeah, absolutely. And say if Florida or Georgia get in a playoff situation, that's something the committee will look at as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, so before I get off, though, I also want to give you a chance to plug your YouTube channel. You do have a YouTube channel. I know you mainly, and some of the other viewers on here mainly know you from seeing you in the comment section on my channel and some of the other college football channels. But you do make college football videos. Just go ahead and give yourself a plug, and so people can come check your channel out.
Yeah, so on YouTube, I make Florida videos. In the off season, I'll probably do some previews of other SEC teams and whatever the fans request. My YouTube channel is Falcons Fury, just like that, capital F, capital F. I just recently started uploading again. I did go on a long hiatus, so apologies for that. But I'll be uploading college videos. So come on by and let's talk about football.
And he's also a Falcons fan, obviously Falcons Fury. Not only a Florida fan. So how great, now, I'm a Panthers fan, so we hate each other, but we both hate the Saints. So how great was it watching the Saints lose in the way that they did, especially after last year in the divisional round, they lose on that crazy fluke play at the last play of the game to Minnesota. And then this year they go down in flames in front of everybody, and they're ready to sue the NFL, and they're crying and whining. Well, you've already seen my videos from the past couple of days. I got people coming on talking about the Illuminati is going on down there in New Orleans. I mean, this is just great for me. How do you like it?
Pete, I made a big old pot of gumbo. With little side of Michael Thomas can't catch a ball, Drew Brees interception, Sean Payton choke, good stuff like that. Listen, Saints fans have been talking yep all season, and they come and lay an egg like this. If you want to see what a true number one receiver does in the national NFC Championship game, just go look at Julio Jones. It's just go look at that, and don't call Roger Goodell. Okay, that man has more important things.
That was a terrible call, but they're blaming the refs. Why is nobody blaming Sean Payton?
They're trying to go Section 8, put in a cheat code, and replay the game. These guys they're idiots.
How come ain't nobody blaming Sean Payton? It's his fault they lost the game. I mean, I watched the game. All he had to do was run the ball in that last drive, make the Rams burn their timeouts, kick a field goal, and they was off to Atlanta for the Super Bowl. But no, I mean, talk about bad clock management, bad timeout management.
I hope he thought they were going to win that game and left that stupid pile of money in the locker room, and they had to walk by as they left or went home. What an idiot.
Oh, anyway, that just that made my weekend watching that. I mean, I was just, the only thing better than watching your team win is watching them lose. I mean, I'm sorry. It was great.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, listen, I appreciate you calling in, and he was one of the first ones to respond to me whenever I put out the request for people to come on, and so yeah, thank you, sir. I can't thank you enough. Everybody, go check out Falcons Fury on YouTube. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Thanks for having me on. I love the show. Keep up what you're doing, and go eat a ham sandwich.
Yep. Again, I'm gonna do. I promise. As soon as I stop recording, I'm gonna go get a ham sandwich.
Perfect.
All right, man. Take it easy. Thanks.
All right. See you.
Well, there you have it, folks. You heard it from Mr. Ham Sandwich himself. Florida is going 10-2. Florida's going to win the East. Their only losses are going to be to Auburn and LSU. They're going to wax Georgia and Miami. And I am off to go get a ham sandwich. Have a great day. Pixie and Pete. Checking out.